the girl they couldn't break. What if the moment they tried to destroy you was actually the moment your greatest power awakened? Keep reading. The story will change how you see strength forever. The silver chains burned against Arya Morwen's wrists, but she refused to scream. Not for them. Not for the pack that had stripped her of everything, her family, her rank, her very identity, all because she bore the mark they feared. Witch blood, they called her. Cursed one. The dungeon beneath the Ironmaw Pack's territory reeked of mold and desperation. Arya had spent 3 months in this darkness, 3 months since the day her parents were executed for the crime of her existence. The crescent moon birthmark on her shoulder blade, pale silver against her bronze skin, was evidence enough for Alpha Garrett's paranoid regime. But tonight, something felt different. The earth hummed beneath the stone floor, a vibration that seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat. Arya pressed her back against the cold wall, feeling that strange energy coil through her veins like liquid moonlight. Her mother's last words echoed in her memory. When they try to break you, remember, you come from a bloodline that bent kingdoms. Heavy footsteps approached. Arya's breath caught as torchlight spilled down the corridor, casting dancing shadows that made her cell seem even smaller. 2 guards appeared, their expressions a mixture of disgust and something else. Fear. "Get up!" the taller one barked. "The Alpha King has arrived for the territorial inspection." All prisoners are to be presented. Arya's pulse quickened. The Alpha King, Chaol Blackthorn, was legend even among the scattered packs. Ruthless, powerful, a king who had unified the northern territories through strength and strategic brilliance. He was the monster children were warned about, the ruler whose very name made lesser alphas bow. And he was here. The guards hauled her to her feet, and pain shot through her legs, muscles atrophied from confinement. They dragged her through the winding corridors of the prison, past cells filled with other undesirables, rogues, debtors, anyone who had displeased Alpha Garrett's increasingly tyrannical rule. The grand hall blazed with firelight. Arya squinted against the brightness, her eyes struggling to adjust. At least 40 pack members had assembled, all perfectly positioned in displays of hierarchy and submission. And there, on the raised platform beside Alpha Garrett's throne, stood a man who seemed to eclipse everything else in the room. Chaol Blackthorn was not what she expected. Yes, he was tall, well over 6 feet of coiled muscle and predatory grace. Yes, his presence commanded the room with an authority that needed no announcement. But his eyes, storm gray and unnervingly perceptive, held something she hadn't anticipated. Intelligence. Sharp, calculating, and in this moment, fixed directly on her. Alpha Garrett was speaking, his voice oozing false deference. "Demonstrate our pack's commitment to tradition and purity, Your Majesty. These prisoners represent the corruption we've purged. That one." Chaol's voice cut through Garrett's speech like a blade through silk. Deep, controlled, and absolutely certain. "Bring her forward." Every head turned toward Arya. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the guards shoved her toward the platform. She stumbled, catching herself before she fell, refusing to collapse before these people. Before him. Chaol descended the steps with fluid purpose. He moved like violence barely contained, each step deliberate. When he stood before her, Arya forced herself to meet his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to lower her eyes, to submit. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "What is your name?" His question was quiet, meant only for her. Arya Morwen. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. And your crime? Existing. A dangerous smile curved the corner of his mouth. Existing as what? Before she could answer, Alpha Garrett interjected, his anxiety poorly masked. She's witch-blood, Your Majesty. Her parents were executed for attempting to hide her nature. We've kept her alive only to study the mark, to better identify others like her. Remove her chains. The command hung in the air like a thunderclap. Your Majesty, I must protest, Garrett began. Kael's head turned slowly toward the lesser Alpha, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I don't recall asking for your input. Remove her chains. The guards fumbled with the locks, their hands shaking. The moment the silver fell away, Arya's wrists throbbed with relief. She rubbed the raw skin, watching Kael through lowered lashes. He studied her with the intensity of someone solving a complex puzzle. Then he did something that stopped her breath entirely. He studied her with the intensity of someone solving a complex puzzle. Then he did something that stopped her breath entirely. The Alpha King extended his hand toward her, not in command, but in offering. You're coming with me, Arya Morwen. And no one... His gaze swept the room, landing on Alpha Garrett with lethal promise. Will stand in my way. The Alpha King's claim. What she discovered in the King's fortress would shatter everything she thought she knew about power, destiny, and the mark that made her an outcast. You won't believe what happens next. The journey to Blackthorn Fortress took 2 days, and Arya spent most of it in a state of bewildered silence. Kael had provided her with a private carriage, warm clothing, and food. Real food, not the stale bread and water she'd survived on for months. He'd also provided guards, though Arya couldn't determine if they were there for her protection or to prevent her escape. Perhaps both. The king himself rode on horseback at the front of the convoy, and Arya found herself watching him through the carriage window more than she cared to admit. He moved with his mount as though they were one creature, commanding without cruelty, leading without question. Why had he saved her? The question circled her mind like a persistent fly. Blackthorn Fortress rose from the mountainside like a crown of stone and steel, its towers piercing the gray sky. As they passed through the massive gates, pack members stopped their work to stare. Arya felt their curiosity like a physical weight. You'll have your own quarters in the East Wing, Kael informed her once they'd dismounted in the courtyard. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to her since leaving Ironmaw territory. My advisor, Elena, will provide you with everything you need. Why am I here? The question escaped before Arya could stop it. Kael paused, his expression unreadable. Because you're valuable. As a prisoner? As a person with answers I need. He stepped closer, and Arya caught the scent of pine and winter air that seemed to cling to him. That mark on your shoulder, it's not a curse, it's a key. Before she could respond, a woman appeared at Kael's side. Elena was elegant and sharp-eyed, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in an intricate braid. She assessed Arya with the quick efficiency of someone who missed nothing. So this is the witch blood everyone's whispering about, Elena said, though her tone held no malice. Welcome to Blackthorn, girl. Try not to cause any diplomatic incidents before dinner. Arya's quarters were more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever lived, even before her parents' execution. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep blue fabrics. Windows overlooked the training grounds where wolves practiced combat in both human and shifted forms. A private bathroom featured a tub large enough to swim in. It felt like a gilded cage. Elena had left her with an entire wardrobe of clothing and instructions to rest. But rest was impossible. Arya's mind spun with questions, fears, and that persistent hum of energy that had only grown stronger since leaving the dungeon. A knock at the door made her jump. "Enter!" she called, expecting a servant. Kyle strode in, and the room suddenly felt smaller. He'd changed from his travel clothes into dark fitted pants and a simple shirt that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. In his hands, he carried an ancient-looking book, its leather cover cracked with age. "We need to talk," he said, setting the book on the table near the fireplace. "About what you really are." Arya's defenses rose instantly. "I know what I am. An outcast. Witchblood. Cursed. Wrong." Kael's interruption was firm, but not unkind. He gestured for her to sit, and after a moment's hesitation, she did. He remained standing, his posture that of a man preparing for battle. "What you are, Arya, is a moonborn." The word sent a shiver down her spine. "I don't know what that means." "Few do." The knowledge was deliberately buried, erased from pack histories about 3 centuries ago during the Great Purge. Kyle opened the book, revealing pages covered in elegant script and detailed illustrations. Moonborns were the bridge between wolf and magic, blessed by the moon goddess herself. They could heal injuries that would kill ordinary wolves, could sense pack bonds across vast distances, could even influence the shift itself. Arya stared at the illustrations, figures with glowing marks, hands raised to the moon, surrounded by ethereal light. If they were so blessed, why were they purged? Because they were powerful, and power frightens those who seek to control others. Kael's jaw tightened. The Alpha Councils of that era saw moonborns as threats to their authority. They spread lies, called them corrupted, witch-touched, hunted them to near extinction. "But why tell me this?" Arya whispered. "Why bring me here?" Kael finally sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her breath catch. "Because war is coming. The Southern Territories are mobilizing under Alpha Maddox's banner. A zealot who believes in pure bloodlines and absolute hierarchy. He's building an army, and his first target will be any pack suspected of harboring undesirables." The implications crashed over Arya like a wave. "You're hiding others like me. I'm protecting them. Rogues, exiles, anyone cast out for being different." His gray eyes held hers with fierce intensity. "But protection isn't enough." "I need strength. I need advantage, and a fully trained moonborn could turn the tide of an entire war. You want to use me as a weapon. I want to help you become what you were meant to be." Kael stood, moving to the window. "You felt it, didn't you? In that dungeon, when the earth sang beneath your feet. That wasn't fear or desperation. That was your power recognizing itself." Arya's hands trembled in her lap. She had felt it, still felt it, thrumming just beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. "If I refuse?" Kael turned back to her, and something vulnerable flickered across his features. "Then you're free to leave." "I don't keep prisoners, Arya. I keep allies." He moved toward the door, then paused. "But know this. If Maddox finds you, He won't offer chains and dungeons. He'll offer fire and ash, to you and everyone who shares your gift. The door closed behind him, leaving Arya alone with the weight of impossible choices. She moved to the book he'd left behind, fingers tracing the illustrations of Moonborns in their full power. In one image, a woman stood before an army, her crescent mark blazing with silver light, wolves bowing at her feet. Not in submission, in reverence. Training and temptation. The moment she unlocked her first real power, everything changed, including the way the Alpha King looked at her. What happens when destiny and desire collide? Keep reading to witness a transformation that will leave you breathless. Training began at dawn. Arya had barely slept, her mind churning with Chael's revelations and the impossible decision before her. But when Elena knocked on her door as the first light touched the mountains, there was no gentleness in her tone. The king doesn't train those who aren't serious. You have 5 minutes to dress and meet us in the eastern courtyard. The courtyard was empty except for Chael, who stood in the center wearing training clothes and an expression of focused determination. Morning mist clung to the ground, giving the space an otherworldly quality. Rule 1, Chael said as Arya approached. Your power responds to your emotional state. Fear will scatter it. Anger will consume you. You need to find the place between calm focus with purposeful intent. How am I supposed to? Don't think. Feel. He moved behind her, and Arya's breath hitched as his hands settled on her shoulders. His touch was warm, grounding. Close your eyes. Tell me what you sense. Arya obeyed, acutely aware of his proximity. I sense the pack bonds. They're like threads of light, connecting everyone in the fortress. Yours is... She paused, surprised. Yours is like a beacon, stronger than the others, more complex. Good. His voice was close to her ear now, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. That's your moonborn sight. Now reach deeper. Feel the earth beneath your feet, the moon's pull, even in daylight. Let it fill you. Arya focused, and suddenly that familiar hum surged through her. But this time, instead of frightening her, she welcomed it. Power flooded her veins like liquid starlight. Her mark began to glow, warm against her skin. Perfect, Chael murmured. Now, channel it outward. Imagine pushing that energy through your hands. She extended her palms, and silver light erupted from them. Not violent, but radiant, beautiful. It danced in the air before dispersing like morning dew. When Arya opened her eyes, Chael was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pride? Fascination? Something else entirely? Again, he commanded, stepping back to give her space. And this time, sustain it longer. They trained for weeks. Every dawn found them in that courtyard, Chael pushing Arya to explore the limits of her abilities. She learned to sense injuries in others, to project her power as both shield and weapon, to track pack bonds across the entire fortress. With each passing day, her control grew, and so did the strange, electric tension between her and the Alpha King. It was in the small moments that Arya felt it most acutely. The way Chael's hand would linger on her back as he corrected her stance. The intensity in his gaze when she successfully manifested a new ability. The rare smiles that transformed his severe features into something almost boyish. But Kael maintained an impenetrable wall of professionalism, even as the air between them crackled with unspoken attraction. "You're distracted today," Elena observed during one of their theory sessions in the library. The older woman had taken to educating Arya about pack politics, history, and the intricacies of Moonborn lore. "I'm fine." "You're staring at that same page and have been for 10 minutes. Elena closed her own book with a soft thump. "Let me give you some advice, girl. Kael Blackthorn is many things: brilliant strategist, fierce protector, uncompromising leader, but he's also a man carrying more weight than any wolf should bear alone." Arya looked up, caught off guard by the maternal gentleness in Elena's voice. "He's been alone at the top for so long, he's forgotten what it means to let someone in," Elena continued. "His parents were assassinated when he was barely 20. His younger sister died in the attack that made him king. He's spent 15 years building this fortress, this sanctuary, but he's built walls around his heart just as high." "Why are you telling me this?" Elena smiled knowingly. "Because I've watched him these past weeks, and I've seen something I thought might be lost forever. Hope. You make him hope, Arya, and that terrifies him more than any army." That night, a commotion in the fortress pulled Arya from her studies. She found Kael in the healing ward, his face grim as healers worked frantically over a wounded wolf on a table. Blood soaked the bandages, and the wolf, a young male barely out of adolescence, whimpered in pain. "Border Patrol," one of the healers explained when she saw Arya. "Maddox's forces attacked a refugee group trying to reach our territory. Most escaped, but this one took Silver to the spine. The poison is spreading too fast. We can't—" "Let me try," Arya heard herself say. All eyes turned to her, including Kael's. "Arya, this is a mortal wound," he said carefully. "If you attempt this and fail, then he dies anyway." She moved to the table, her hands already glowing with silver light. "But if I don't try, I'm useless. All this training means nothing if I can't help when it matters." Kael nodded once, a world of trust in that simple gesture. Arya placed her hands over the wound and reached deep into her power, deeper than she'd ever gone before. She felt the silver poison like black veins spreading through the young wolf's system, felt his life force flickering like a candle in wind. She poured her energy into him, imagining the poison dissolving, the torn flesh knitting together, the severed nerves reconnecting. The room filled with silver light so bright that everyone shielded their eyes. When it faded, Arya collapsed against the table, exhausted. But the young wolf's breathing had steadied. The black veins of silver poison were gone. The wound on his back was closed, leaving only a faint scar. The healers erupted in astonished whispers. Kael was beside her instantly, his strong arm supporting her weight. "Elena, take her to her chambers. Make sure she rests." "I'm fine," Arya protested weakly, though her legs felt like water. "You're magnificent," Kael murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. His hand cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "And absolutely reckless. That could have killed you." But it didn't. His eyes searched hers, that wall of professional distance finally cracking. "Arya, An urgent knock interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. A guard burst in, his expression panicked. "Your Majesty, scouts just reported massive troop movements on the southern border. Alpha Maddox is marching, 3,000 strong, maybe more. They'll reach our territory in less than a week. The war they'd been preparing for had finally arrived. Betrayal and revelation, just when she thought she'd found her place. A devastating secret from the past threatens to destroy everything, including her growing bond with the king who saved her. The truth will shatter you. The war room hummed with controlled chaos. Maps covered every surface, marked with troop positions, supply routes, and defensive strategies. Chaol stood at the center, his commanders gathered around him as they debated how to face Maddox's superior numbers. Arya had been invited to attend, not as an observer, but as an asset. "We could fortify the mountain passes," suggested Marcus, Chaol's second-in-command and oldest friend. "Force them into narrow corridors where numbers mean less." "That delays the inevitable," another commander argued. "Maddox has resources we don't. He can wait us out." "Not if we strike first," Chaol said quietly. Every head turned toward him. "A targeted assault on his supply lines, disrupt his logistics, force him to fight on our terms before he's ready." "That's a massive risk, my lord. If the strike fails, if we sit behind walls and wait for him to massacre every refugee camp between here and his territory, we've already failed." Chaol's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "We are not just protecting Blackthorn. We're protecting the idea that strength comes from unity, not purity, that worth isn't determined by bloodline." His eyes found Arya's across the room, and she felt that familiar electric connection spark between them. The meeting continued for hours, plans forming and reforming as they considered every angle. But Arya couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't identify what. It wasn't until she was leaving the war room that her moonborn senses flickered with warning. She paused in the corridor, reaching out with that inner sight Chaol had helped her develop. The pack bonds throughout the fortress glowed in her mind's eye like a constellation. But there, on the western wing, one thread pulsed with a sickly, dissonant color. Betrayal. Arya followed the sensation, her heart pounding. It led her to a rarely used storage room, where voices filtered through the partially open door. "No choice. Maddox has my son. If I don't provide intelligence, he'll—" "Your personal tragedy doesn't justify treason," Elena's voice, cold as winter steel. "You've put every soul in this fortress at risk. I can still fix this, if I can just—" The sound of a blade being drawn cut through the conversation. Arya pushed the door open to find Elena holding a knife to the throat of Commander Harris, one of Chaol's trusted advisors. The older man's face was streaked with tears, his eyes wild with desperation. "Arya..." Elena's expression didn't change. "Perfect timing. Go get the king." "Wait." Arya stepped into the room, her mind racing. She focused her moonborn sight on Harris, reading the tangled mess of his emotions, fear, guilt, but underneath it all, genuine love for his son. "Elena, what's happening?" "Harris has been feeding information to Maddox for 3 weeks. Troop numbers, defensive positions, everything." Elena's grip on the knife didn't waver. "The question is whether he's salvageable or a liability we can't afford." "Please," Harris choked out. "My son is only 15. Maddox took him during a raid, said he'd be executed if I didn't cooperate. I never wanted... I didn't mean for it to go this far." Arya felt her power surge in response to the raw anguish in the room. "There's another way." "Arya, don't involve yourself in this," Elena warned. "I already am." She moved closer to Harris, her mark beginning to glow. I can track pack bonds, remember? Even severed ones. Let me find his son. Elena lowered the knife slightly, intrigued. That's a considerable distance, and if Maddox has him in a warded camp, then we'll know where those camps are. Arya placed her hand on Harris's shoulder, ignoring Elena's protest. Think about your son. Picture him in your mind. Harris closed his eyes, and Arya dove into the connection between father and child. It was like following a thread through a vast darkness, but she held on to it with fierce determination. The bond led south, through miles of territory, until she felt it anchor in a specific location. She gasped as the vision crystallized, a fortified camp, heavily guarded, with dozens of prisoners held in warded cells. Young wolves, mostly, taken to leverage their parents' cooperation. I see him, Arya whispered, and I see the others. Maddox is using them as hostages, forcing their families to betray their own packs. When she opened her eyes, Kyle stood in the doorway, his expression dangerous. Your Majesty, Harris began. Silence. Kyle's command was absolute. He looked at Elena. Secure him until we sort this out. Then to Arya. My office. Now, the walk to Kyle's private office was silent and tense. Once inside, he closed the door with measured control, which somehow felt more ominous than if he'd slammed it. Do you understand what you just did? His voice was quiet, almost conversational. You interfered in a matter of pack security. You prevented my advisor from administering justice to a confirmed traitor. He's not a traitor. He's a father being blackmailed. He's both. Kale's composure cracked. And because of his cooperation, Maddox knows our defensive positions, knows our troop numbers. That intelligence will cost lives, Arya, maybe hundreds of them. Then let me fix it. She stood her ground, even as his anger washed over her. I can find that prison camp. We can rescue those hostages and cut off one of Maddox's greatest advantages. You're not a soldier. No, I'm something better. I'm the one weapon Maddox doesn't know you have. She moved closer, refusing to be intimidated. You said war was coming. You said you needed me. Well, here I am, offering you a strategic advantage that could... I need you alive. The words burst from him with startling intensity. Kyle ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time, Arya saw the carefully controlled Alpha King come undone. Do you have any idea what it would do to me if you were captured? If Maddox got his hands on you? The air between them crackled with sudden, undeniable electricity. Why? Arya whispered. Why would it matter so much? Kyle closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Because somewhere between saving you from that dungeon and watching you become the most powerful force in my territory, I made the catastrophic mistake of falling in love with you. Arya's breath caught. Kyle, I know all the reasons it's impossible, he continued, his forehead nearly touching hers. I'm the king. You're everything, and we're standing on the edge of a war that could destroy us both. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this, that I don't want... She kissed him. It was fierce and desperate, weeks of tension finally breaking free. Kyle responded immediately, one hand sliding into her hair while the other pulled her closer. He kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to questions he'd been afraid to ask. When they finally broke apart, both breathless. His eyes held a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "I won't lose you," he murmured against her lips. "Then trust me to fight." She gripped his shirt, holding him close. "Trust me to be strong enough to stand beside you, not behind you." Kael rested his forehead against hers, a shuddering breath escaping him. "You terrify me, Arya Morwen." "Good. That makes us even." A sharp knock interrupted the moment. Marcus's voice came through the door, urgent. "Your Majesty, we have a situation." "One of our scouts just returned. Badly injured. He's asking for the Moonborn." The scout was barely conscious when Arya reached the healing ward. His name was Thomas, and he'd been part of the reconnaissance team monitoring Maddox's movements. Whatever he'd encountered had left him with claw marks deep enough to expose bone. But worse than his physical injuries was the terror in his eyes. "Tell me what happened," Kael commanded gently, kneeling beside the healing table as Arya began channeling her power into the wounds. "There's something with Maddox's army," Thomas gasped. "Something unnatural. I saw it tear through a pack of rogues like they were nothing. It's not Wolf. Not entirely. It's corrupted. Wrong." Arya felt a chill run down her spine. As she healed Thomas's wounds, her Moonborn sight picked up traces of dark energy, familiar yet twisted. She'd felt something similar when reading about the Purge, about the methods used to hunt Moonborns. "Shadow wolves," Elena breathed from the doorway, having arrived moments earlier. Her face had gone pale. Maddox found the forbidden texts. "What are shadow wolves?" Arya asked, though part of her already feared the answer. Elena's expression was grim. "They're what happens when you force a wolf to sacrifice their humanity for power. A perversion of the shift, fueled by dark magic. The Alphas who led the Purge created them as weapons against Moonborns." She looked at Kael. "If Maddox has resurrected that technique, this war just became significantly more dangerous." Kael's jaw tightened. "Then we adapt. Marcus, double the patrols and brief all commanders about this threat. Elena, dig up everything we have about shadow wolves, their weaknesses, how they're made, everything." His hand found Arya's, squeezing gently. "And you and I are going to plan a prison break." Despite everything, the revelations, the danger, the impossible odds, Arya felt a surge of fierce determination. She wasn't the broken girl in chains anymore. She was a Moonborn standing beside an Alpha King who believed in her, and together they were going to change the rules of this war. The rescue that changed everything. In the darkest hour, she would make a choice that would either save them all or destroy everything they'd built. What she unleashed in that prison camp would rewrite the fate of every wolf in the territories. This is the moment you've been waiting for. The strike team moved through the forest like ghosts. Arya ran beside Kael, her enhanced senses cataloging every sound, every shift in the wind. Behind them, Marcus led 20 of Blackthorn's most elite warriors, wolves who'd volunteered for a mission everyone knew might be suicide. 3 days of planning had led to this moment. 3 days of studying maps, debating strategies, and stealing brief, desperate kisses in the moments when no one was watching. Kael had tried everything to convince Arya to stay behind, but she'd been immovable. Without her ability to sense and disable the magical wards around Maddox's prison camp, the mission would fail before it began. "Half a mile out," Marcus whispered through the mental link that connected the strike team. "Guard rotations should be shifting in 4 minutes." Arya reached out with her Moonborn sight and the world transformed into threads of energy and light. She could see the prison camp ahead, a dark blot on the landscape, surrounded by pulsing wards that hummed with corrupted power. And within those wards, dozens of flickering life forces. The hostages. But there was something else. Something that made her blood run cold. "Cale," she breathed, gripping his arm. "The Shadow Wolves. There are at least 6 of them patrolling the perimeter and inside the main tent." She swallowed hard. "There's something bigger. Stronger. I think Maddox himself is here." The Alpha King's expression didn't change, but she felt the tension ripple through him. "Can you break the wards without alerting them?" "I can try." "That's not good enough. It's all we have." Arya met his eyes, seeing her own fear reflected back at her. "Trust me." Kael's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her lips. "With my life. With my kingdom. With everything I am." He kissed her then, fierce and claiming, a promise and a prayer wrapped into one moment. When he pulled back, the vulnerable man disappeared behind the mask of the Alpha King. "Positions," he commanded. "We move on Arya's signal." She crept forward alone, her heart hammering against her ribs. The wards loomed before her like invisible walls of thorns, designed to shred any wolf who touched them. But Arya wasn't just any wolf. She was Moonborn, and these wards had been built with old magic. Magic that sang in recognition when she pressed her glowing hands against the barrier. "Forgive me," she whispered to the ancient power, "but I'm taking back what was stolen." Silver light erupted from her palms, spreading across the ward like cracks in ice. She poured everything into it, not just her power, but her purpose. Every moment of suffering in that dungeon, every person who'd been cast out for being different, every child stolen to force their parents into betrayal. The wards shattered, and every shadow wolf in the camp turned toward her. "Now!" Kael's roar split the night as the strike teams surged forward. Chaos erupted. Blackthorn warriors clashed with Maddox's guards in a symphony of snarls and steel. Arya ran toward the prison cells, Marcus and 2 others flanking her as protection. The hostages stared at them with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "Harris's son!" Arya called out. "Daniel Harris, where is he?" A young wolf raised his hand, his eyes wide. "Here! I'm here!" "Everyone stay calm," Marcus commanded, already working on the cell locks. "We're getting you out." That's when Arya felt it. A presence so dark and twisted it made her stomach revolt. She spun to find a massive shadow wolf blocking the exit, its eyes glowing with sickly yellow light. Behind it, more shadows gathered, and stepping through them, wearing a smile that promised violence, was Alpha Maddox himself. He was smaller than she'd expected, compact and wiry rather than imposing, but the cruelty in his eyes was bottomless, and the corrupted power radiating from him made Arya's skin crawl. "The famous Moonborn," Maddox said conversationally, as though they were meeting at a social gathering rather than a battlefield. "Kael's little pet project. I was hoping you'd come." "Let them go," Arya demanded, positioning herself between Maddox and the hostages. "This is between our packs, not children." "Everything is between packs, girl. Every decision, every alliance, every drop of diluted blood that weakens our kind." His expression hardened. "You and your filthy magic represent everything wrong with the modern territories. Kyle idealism has made him soft, but I'll remind the Pax what true strength looks like. By torturing children? By creating monsters? Arya's mark blazed with silver light. You're not strong. You're terrified. Maddox's smile vanished. Kill her. The shadow wolves lunged. Arya's power exploded outward in a wave of pure radiance. The corrupted creatures shrieked as silver light seared through their twisted forms, but there were too many. Claws raked across her shoulder, and she cried out as pain bloomed hot and vicious. Then Kyle was there, his shifted form, a massive black wolf with eyes like storms, tearing into the shadows with primal fury. The bond between them sang, and Arya realized she could feel his strength, his determination, as clearly as her own heartbeat. Together, his voice whispered through their connection. We fight together. Arya let her power flow into him, and Chael's form began to glow with silver light. He moved faster, hit harder, the combination of alpha strength and moonborn magic creating something unprecedented. Around them, the strike team rallied, emboldened by their king's transformation. But Maddox wasn't finished. He shifted into his own wolf form, rust-red and scarred, and lunged not at Chael, but at the hostages. Arya didn't think. She simply moved. She threw herself between Maddox and the children, and his fangs sank into her side. Agony white-hot and all-consuming tore through her. But even as blood soaked her shirt, Arya's hands found purchase on Maddox's corrupted form, and she pulled. It was instinct, pure and primal. She reached into the twisted magic that fueled him and began unraveling it thread by thread. Maddox howled, thrashing, but she held on with desperate strength. The corruption fought back, trying to seep into her, but her moonborn light burned it away like morning fog. Arya, let go! Chael's human voice, frantic. You'll kill yourself. Get them out, she gasped. Get everyone out. She felt Chael's anguish through their bond, felt him torn between his duty to his people and his love for her. In the end, the Alpha King made the choice that would haunt him. Retreat, he commanded. Everyone fall back. The strike team grabbed hostages and ran. Marcus physically dragged a struggling Chael toward the exit, and Arya held on to Maddox, their powers locked in a battle that was tearing them both apart from the inside. When she finally released him, Maddox collapsed, his breathing ragged. The corruption that had fueled his shadow wolves was gone, burned away by moonborn fire. He was just a wolf now, broken, defeated, and stripped of the dark magic that had made him dangerous. Arya staggered backward, her vision swimming. Through the haze, she saw Chael fighting his way back to her, saw him catch her as her legs gave out. Stupid, brilliant, impossible woman, he choked out, pressing his hand against the wound in her side. Stay with me. Arya, stay with me. Did we get them? She whispered. All of them. Every single hostage. His voice broke. But if you die, it won't matter. Nothing will matter. She touched his face, leaving a smear of blood on his cheek. Then I guess I'd better not die. The world went dark, but she fell, knowing she was held by someone who would never let her go. The dawn of a new era. She survived the impossible, but what she awakened in that moment of sacrifice would transform not just her fate, but the destiny of every wolf in the territories. This ending will stay with you long after you turn the final page. You need to see how their story concludes. Arya woke to sunlight and the scent of pine. For a moment, she thought she was dead. The light too warm, the bed too comfortable, everything too peaceful to be real. Then pain lanced through her side, sharp and grounding, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was alive. Finally, Elena's voice, thick with relief. We were beginning to worry you'd sleep through the entire treaty negotiation. Arya's eyes flew open. Elena sat beside her bed, looking exhausted but whole. Beyond her, through the window, Arya could see Blackthorn Fortress bathed in late afternoon light. How long? Arya croaked. 4 days. That stunt you pulled with Maddox nearly killed you. Kael's been... Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. Well, let's just say the Council has been treated to several demonstrations of what an Alpha King looks like when he's barely holding himself together. Memory flooded back. The prison camp, the shadow wolves, Maddox's fangs tearing into her side. The hostages? Safe. All of them reunited with their families. Elena's expression softened. You did it, Arya. You broke Maddox's hold over dozens of wolves across multiple territories. Harris has been outside your door every day with his son, wanting to thank you. And Maddox? In custody, stripped of his alpha status and facing judgment from the Territorial Council. Elena leaned forward. But here's what you don't know yet. When you burned the corruption out of him, something happened. The shadow wolves he'd created reverted to their original forms. Wolves who'd been forced into that transformation, thinking they were monsters forever. You saved them too. Tears pricked Arya's eyes. I didn't know I could. Neither did anyone else. There are records of Moonborns healing, protecting, even enhancing other wolves' abilities. But purifying corruption on that scale? Reversing dark magic? Elena's smile held a hint of pride. You've rewritten what we thought was possible. The door burst open, and Kyle strode in. He looked like he'd aged years in 4 days, his eyes shadowed, his jaw rough with stubble, his clothes rumpled. But when he saw Arya awake, the transformation was immediate. Relief, joy, and something deeper than words flooded his features. Out, he told Elena, never taking his eyes off Arya. Your Majesty, the council meeting in 20 minutes. I don't care if the moon goddess herself is waiting. Out Elena left with a knowing smile, closing the door behind her. Kael crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the bed. His hands framed Arya's face with such gentleness it made her chest ache. Don't ever do that again, he whispered, his voice raw. Don't ever make me choose between you and my duty, because I will burn this entire kingdom to ash if it means keeping you alive. Kyle, I know what you're going to say. That you made the right choice. That those hostages needed you. That their lives mattered. His forehead touched hers. And you're right. But I need you to understand something, Arya Morwen. I have built my entire reign on logic, strategy, and putting the needs of many above the needs of one. But with you. He pulled back to meet her eyes. With you, I'm just a man who's terrified of losing the other half of his soul. Arya's breath caught. Other half? We're mated. The words fell between them like a revelation and a confession. That connection we felt during the battle, that wasn't just teamwork or compatible magic. It's the mate bond. Rare, supposedly once in a lifetime, completely beyond our control. His thumb traced her lower lip. You're mine, and I'm yours, and I have never been more grateful or more terrified of anything in my life. Joy surged through Arya, so intense it made her lightheaded. When did you know? The moment you stepped into that grand hall in chains, looking at me like you'd fight the world rather than bow. Chaol's smile was soft and devastating. I've been falling ever since. I just didn't want to admit it because I knew once I did, there would be no going back. And now? Now? He leaned in, his lips hovering just above hers. Now I'm done pretending. Done hiding. Done being the distant king who keeps everyone at arm's length. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, a claiming and a surrender all at once. I want to wake up beside you. I want to train with you. I want to build a kingdom where people like you aren't hunted but celebrated. And I want to do it all while being absolutely, hopelessly in love with you. Arya kissed him back with everything she had, ignoring the protest from her healing wound. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she couldn't stop smiling. The council is going to have opinions about their king mating a former prisoner, she pointed out. The council can adjust. Chaol's grin turned wolfish. Besides, after what you did at that prison camp, every alpha in the territories is rethinking their stance on Moonborns. You're not just my mate, Arya. You're a symbol, proof that the old fears were lies and that unity makes us stronger than purity ever could. A knock interrupted them. Marcus's voice filtered through. Your Majesty, the delegates from the southern territories have arrived. They're requesting an immediate audience. Chaol sighed, pressing one more kiss to Arya's forehead. Duty calls. Rest, heal, and when you're ready. He stood, straightening his shirt and somehow shifting back into the commanding Alpha King. When you're ready, there's a crown that would look perfect beside mine. He left before she could process that particular revelation, leaving Arya stunned and grinning like a fool. 2 weeks later, Arya stood on the balcony of Blackthorn Fortress, watching wolves from a dozen different territories train together in the courtyard below. Former rogues sparred beside pack soldiers. Moonborns, 6 others had revealed themselves after hearing about Arya, practiced their gifts openly, without fear. Arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and she leaned back into Chaol's embrace. The southern alphas have agreed to the new territorial laws, he murmured against her ear. No more persecution based on bloodline or magic. No more exile for being different. It's not perfect, but it's a start. And Maddox? Exiled to the frozen wastes, alone, powerless, and forbidden from ever holding rank again. Chaol turned her to face him. Justice without execution. A new approach for a new era. Arya traced the line of his jaw, marveling at how this fierce, complicated man had become her home. What happens now? Now? Chaol's smile held both mischief and promise. Now we announce our mating to the territories. Now we finish converting this fortress into a true sanctuary for anyone seeking refuge. Now we train the next generation to be better than we were. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a silver ring embedded with a moonstone. And now I ask you, properly and before witnesses, if you'll stand beside me, not behind, not in front, but beside, as we build something worth fighting for. Arya's vision blurred with tears as she extended her hand. Yes, always yes. As Kael slid the ring onto her finger, wolves in the courtyard below erupted in howls, a chorus of celebration that echoed through the mountains. It was the sound of a new beginning, of walls coming down and bridges being built. Arya Morwen had entered Blackthorn Fortress in chains, broken and afraid. She stood here now as a moonborn in her full power, mated to a king who'd proven that true strength lay not in dominance, but in unity. They had tried to break her spirit in that dungeon, had tried to convince her she was cursed and worthless, but in the end, they'd only forged her into something unbreakable. And the Alpha King who fell to his knees before her did so not in submission, but in recognition of an equal, a partner who would help him reshape their entire world. As the sun set over Blackthorn, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Arya kissed her mate and thought about the girl she'd been just months ago. That girl would never have believed this future was possible, but that girl hadn't yet learned the truth that Arya now carried in her bones. Sometimes the moment they try to destroy you is the moment you discover you were always meant to rise. The end. Thank you for reading this story of resilience, love, and transformation. If Arya and Kael's journey moved you, imagine what other stories are waiting to be discovered. Sometimes the characters we fall in love with remind us of our own strength and show us that no matter how broken we feel, we're capable of becoming something extraordinary.